welcome back to my channel. My name is Kelsey and I'm here today to do my August wrap up. Listen, you know the drill. Glasses on, makeup off. I don't feel like recording with makeup on today. I literally took all my makeup out. You know when you're like drunk at a club and you're like have that conversation with yourself in the mirror, or like when you're on the toilet and you're like, girl, what is going on? That's the conversation I had with myself, because I was like, why do we need to put makeup on? Sometimes we just need to record videos without makeup, and it is what it is. And we're not going to talk about why I never put makeup on for wrap-ups, or at least I most often don't. So I had a pretty shitty reading month, and I think that was going to be apparent. I think it was going to happen from the August TBR. I put a lot of classics, and I think when you read a bunch of classics one after the other, unless you're like a classic girly, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And I think that's pretty prevalent in the stack of books that I have right here, the amount that I've read. I also went on vacation. I went to Italy for 2 weeks. I went to see my family. I went to my cousin's wedding. I did not read at all. I would just wake up, beach, eat, go to bed. So that was the gist of it. Bought a Kindle to read at the beach. Never brought the Kindle to the beach. Money spending. So let's get into these statistics for the month. I read 8 books in the month of August. Not my best at all. In regards to pages, this has also been the lowest page count of the year, I'm pretty sure. So in regards to that page count, I read 2,870 pages, which comes out to about 92 pages per day. My goal is 100. So it's not like I'm that far off. If I would have read maybe a slightly longer book, it would have adjusted. And in regards to the hours listened on audio, I listened to about 48 hours. That's probably The Throne of Glass, a couple of classics here. In regards to the star ratings, this is where we see why I had a pretty sluggish month. So we had 1 5-star book, which was amazing. Definitely one of my favorite books of the year. So I'm very excited to talk about it. And then we have 1 4-star book, 6 3-star books, 0 2 stars, 0 1 stars, with an average of 3.56 stars. Listen, it was bound to happen. We were bound to have a bad month. In regards to the gender identity of the authors, I read 5 books from female authors and 3 from male authors. 4 of the books I read were adult, 2 were YA, and 2 were middle grade. And just in regards to the format of the books, I read 3 audiobooks, 3 ebooks, and 2 physical books. So let's get into the reviews. So we'll start right off the bat with the only book I DNF'd this month, and that was a collection of George Orwell's essays. I don't know if I thought I was the most intelligent bitch on the planet. As much as I love my Georgie boy, as much as I love 1984 and Animal Farm, methinks I'm gonna stick with his science fiction stuff or his just fiction work in general. I wasn't really grasping anything from the book. I got about 150 pages into this relatively, and it was just boring. I didn't care what the essays were talking about. I didn't care what George Orwell had to say. I've been really looking forward to picking up this book, which is a shame, but I don't think I'm ever gonna pick this up again. I'll probably keep it just because, like I said, I love George Orwell as an author, so it'll stick with my collection of his books, but we're steering clear from this. Next, we'll get into my 1 5-star of the month. That was The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. Absolute perfection in a hardcover installment. So The Atlas 6 follows a group of 6 individuals who are kind of handpicked in order to join this secret society. The Alexandrian Society is basically a society of like researchers. It is a dark academia book where the 6 of them come together and learn that by the end of the year, only 5 can survive. Their knowledge and skills are put to the test throughout the book. I'm obsessed with this. I'm obsessed with this. In a matter of a couple of pages, I was completely sucked in. So I 100% knew that this was going to be a 5-star read. You know when you have that sometimes where you're like in the book, you're reading it and you're like, oh my God, it's happening. This is a 5-star read. That's exactly how I felt when I dived into this. I knew this was going to be one of my favorite series, so I immediately pre-ordered The Atlas Paradox, which is the next book that comes out. I honestly don't have much to say about this book, and you know how it is when you like really love a book. It's just that everything is perfection. So it's like everything in this book is good. The characters, the plot, the writing. I think Olivia Blake is an extremely talented writer. I'm like absolutely impressed by this. This, however, I do want to point out is absolutely a novel about characters. If you are more of a plot-driven reader, I don't know if you will absolutely love it to the level that I did, but I still think the plot was good. It's just that every character has their own personality. Every character is like essential to the novel. So I just really, really loved that aspect, and I love how Olivia Blake focused on characters. I just love this. I literally have nothing more to say. Pick it up if you've been hearing about it. I definitely get the hype. I tabbed this so much. There was just so many things in here that were interesting and thought-provoking. Like, I just love this. I love what Olivia Blake had to say. Highly recommend. Definitely one of my favorites of the year. After that, I read a classic favorite of mine. This is Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, one of my favorite installments in the Throne of Glass series, or used to be at least. I feel like I say this plot synopsis every month at least twice. This is the second book in the Throne of Glass series, and the Throne of Glass series basically follows a character named Selena Sardothian. Selena is an assassin who is living in the salt mines due to something she had done in her past, and Selena is essentially selected by Prince Dorian in order to join this competition where the last one standing then becomes the king's assassin. The series definitely diverts from that plot point from this book specifically, so I was really interested to see how I felt about it again. The first time I read this book, I gave it 4 stars, but that definitely changed upon reread. While I still enjoyed this novel, I definitely found it to be like a bridge built between 2 very different stories that Sarah J. Maas was trying to tell. I definitely think that this is a common complaint that a lot of people have about Crown of Midnight, especially because 75% of the novel is kind of boring. It really only gets good at the end, because it really is that ending that kind of closes out the first 2 books and the novella series kind of about this assassin named Selena Sardothian, and then opens up into a newer type of fantasy series. I think a lot of what I need to say, or at least my criticisms of the novel, come a bit spoilery, especially when we dive into how the Throne of Glass books are going to relate to the entire Maasverse. I think this book opens up a lot of discussions. I did tab quite a bit of things that I think are relative to the rest of the universe, so that was a really cool experience and something that I particularly enjoyed. Reading this book, I still love Cale. I think Cale gets a bad rep. I don't think he's half as bad as people make him seem. I love him. I will stand by him. I can't wait to read Tower of Dawn and get into that book. It's definitely my favorite of the series. This wasn't. I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars. It was definitely still an enjoyable experience, but felt more lackluster upon reread. It was definitely far more boring than I think it needed to be. After that, I read an arc for a book called Wake the Bones by Elizabeth Kilcoyne. This book is kind of a like YA horror book that follows a girl named Laurel. Laurel dropped out of college in order to help her uncle on his tobacco farm, and instead of being able to help her family, the devil kind of re-enters her life. She feels like he kind of affected her mother, and the pile of bones that she kind of is like taxiderming start to get up and walk on their own. If you can't tell, I really barely remember the synopsis of the book, so that should give you like the gist of how I felt about it. The writing in the book, I think, is stunning, and that's the number one thing I remember of the novel. I think Kilcoyne has this like flowery writing style that I particularly really enjoy. There are sentences sprinkled throughout the novel that definitely sound like poetry. The relationships between all the characters in the novel are romanticized and they feel kind of dreamlike, and I think that that is due to the talent of Kilcoyne's writing. Not to mention how the novel then kind of feels like a gothic horror, and again, due to the writing. There were moments where the atmosphere in the novel really spooked me. However, besides the writing style and besides this like gothic horror atmosphere, there is quite little else I enjoyed about the novel. I think the overall plot, the overarching plot of the novel is kind of boring, and I believe that that is particularly due to the fact that the magic system in the book is not really explained. I really wanted to enjoy this and I just wasn't invested in it. I think if the magic system, or at least the reasons why the horror was being done, was explained a bit better, I think I would have really enjoyed this more. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It's a solid YA horror, but not the best I've read. After that, I picked up a Canadian classic. This is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. This story takes place in Prince Edward Island, where a sibling duo named Marilla and Matthew are looking to adopt a child in order to help them. They are particularly looking for a boy because Matthew needs more help taking care of the farm. However, when Matthew goes to pick up the orphan at the train station, he realizes he is stuck with a little vibrant spring chicken little girl named Anne. I think this is a Canadian classic for a reason. I think you could tell by the smile on my face that I just really enjoyed this overall. Anne is such a fun and charming character. The minute you meet her on page, you are smiling. I also think that Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert are such interesting characters. They really add to Anne's development. Even though they each have their individual quirks, I found them to both be super endearing. And despite this being written in the early 1900s, I found this to be incredibly progressive, and I still think it holds up to a modern audience. There are some like little caveats here and there with that statement, but I definitely think it holds up, and I definitely think it's still really fun and interesting. Because it is written for younger readers, you can definitely sense the morality and teachings that are within the novel, the fact that each chapter is kind of like its own story. But despite the morality and teachings within each individual story, I didn't find it to be too preachy or too Puritan. There are moments of like religiousness, but I think that's to be expected of 1900s Canada. Anne is really headstrong, and towards the end of the novel, we see her pursuing education, getting to the top of her class, leading her own school. So I definitely found this to be really inspirational. I can see how it still holds up today to modern readers. My one complaint is definitely that structure I mentioned of the novel. Each chapter is written like its own story, like I said, and sometimes that didn't feel cohesive to me. Some chapters didn't feel like they belonged, or they felt kind of mismatched into the novel. But otherwise, this was absolutely great. I really enjoyed this, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. After that, I picked up the Iliad by Homer and translated by Caroline Alexander. This is the classic poem from ancient Greece that follows the Trojan War, the fall of Helen, the death of Achilles. I'm really at a crossroads with how I can critique this novel, because what more can I say about a novel that is like centuries old, that has like literally classes on it. I am no ancient Greece professor, so I don't know what else I can really add here. This novel has been told and retold again. I can definitely see why. It is drama filled. There is gore, there is fighting, there is love, there is gods entering any which point that they want. They are meddling, they are gossiping. It's basically a winning combo for drama lovers. I found it really hilarious actually how the gods constantly got involved, and I really enjoyed reading those portions of the novel. I definitely thought that they were the most interesting aspects of the story. There are definitely elements of the tale that I found pretty unnecessary. Like, who am I to say that? Like, this is the conflict I'm trying to have. Like, who am I to say Homer put things in here unnecessarily? But I just feel like he did. But I'm surprised by how many themes and plot beats are still pretty relevant today, like Achilles and Patroclus. Like, that love story between 2 best friends, we love it, we stan. Other than that, I found it to be really long. Like I said, there are some parts that I find unnecessary. So there were some sluggish books in the novel, because they're split into 24 books, right? So there were some like sluggish aspects of the book that I found myself like dozing off or not really paying attention. So I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Definitely not my favorite Homer, and you will see that in my September wrap up. Then the last classic I read for the month was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is the story of Guy Montag. Guy Montag is a fireman, but not in the way that we know in this futuristic setting, because the houses, from what I understand in the book, the buildings are like not flammable anymore. So due to the lack of like fires to put out, the firemen then become people that put fires, and what they do burn is these illicit substances called books. I was very eager to pick up this book for a really long time, because like my favorite subgenre of like classic literature is definitely dystopian futures. And while I think I really enjoyed the idea of Bradbury's concept of the future, where the pursuit of knowledge results in the burning of books, which is not really far from the truth of today, the overall execution of the novel was kind of confusing and a little lackluster, a little boring for me. There's a lot of analysis I think I could get into of how this novel fails as like a cohesive piece, and this partly falls to Guy Montag as a main character who, despite having exactly one thought of intelligence at the beginning of the novel, is absolutely the most dense and stupid character that I have ever read from, and he just changes at the will of Bradbury to advance the story. There is no like reasoning behind Guy Montag's actions, besides the fact that Ray Bradbury wanted to add a little spice, he wanted to add a little drama. Everything in this novel is extremely surface level, and I feel like for a novel where the concern, and the very real concern, for losing our access to knowledge and critical thought, the metaphors themselves are so convoluted and so lost that it just simply does not make sense anymore. Also, Clarice being a manic pixie dream girl slash child who makes Guy think and is conveniently disappeared from the plot after he has one thought. Goodbye. Also, if you've read this specific edition and Ray Bradbury's like afterwards, yikes. Yikes. I wish I didn't read them. This was a cool concept. I think he had a real thing going for him here. I think it could have been really interesting, but overall it was meh. I gave it 3 stars purely based on concept and what I took from the novel, which wasn't much. Then to like not put myself in a reading slump, I needed to read some happy things. So I ended up picking up an arc for The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Madana, and this was really cute. It basically follows a witch named Mika Moon, who is one of the very few witches left in Britain. She has to hide her magic, but decides to use it to kind of start a YouTube channel where she's able to make a little bit of extra money, and people don't really think that she's a real witch until one does. And this man invites her to his cottage in the hopes that Mika will be able to take care of 3 young witches that he is keeping secret from the world. So this was a really fun and cute read, exactly what I was needing. It was partly a romance, but mostly a book that looks into the fear of one's own abandonment that wraps into a sweet story about a witch and her found family. What really worked for me in this book is Mika and the love interest Jamie's discussions on not being able to trust people. I thought this was surprising and developed and a great addition to what could have been a very bland, grumpy sunshine relationship. Additionally, I really love the children whom Mika is kind of tasked with teaching witchcraft to. I think children can sometimes come off as annoying in romance novels, and it takes a real skill to make children's antics charming, especially one child in this book named Terracotta. She is a spicy little demon and I loved her, and I think Madana did a great job at making her seem kind of cute and charming. But where I think I would have enjoyed this novel a bit more is definitely a problem that I'm seeing now that I'm like doing my reviews, looking at these notes with a lot of books I had this month, and that is the magic system and the world building. Nothing is really explained, and a lot of plot points are kind of just expected to be believed in the novel, which is difficult for me to explain without going into spoilers, but definitely something that I think could have used more explanation. I think if these elements would have been more fleshed out or explained better in a way, had like a different reasoning behind them, I would have enjoyed this even more. It's a wholesome, witchy read. I definitely thought it was cute. I definitely think I needed it. I would highly recommend. I gave it 3.5 stars. Really enjoyed it, and I think it's a fun time if you're looking for it. And then the last book I read this month was The Demigod Files by Rick Riordan. This is essentially just a collection of short stories slash like quizzes, maps of the Percy Jackson universe. And I read this because if you watched my TBR or my video announcing this, Hanani and I are diving into the Heroes of Olympus read along, and this month, the month we are currently in, September, I am diving into the Lost Hero. So a lot of people said like just to give this a try, it's like a fun read, so I just decided to pick it up just to see. And this is the only book I read in Italy, so I have nice fun memories of reading what is a kind of retelling of Mediterranean myth in the Mediterranean, so that was nice. But this was just a fun quick read. I don't think it provided any additional information that is needed or necessary for the series, which can be like both a good and bad thing, I guess. Good because I enjoyed that each individual story that took place within the novel felt complete, it felt well-rounded, it didn't feel like you needed to read more to kind of understand what was going on. But bad because they were short and kind of useless, I guess. But I'm like an adult reading this, you know, so it's like it's useless in my opinion, but do I think it's like fun and worth reading for children? Absolutely. I still loved the humor. I think it really shines through in Rick Riordan's writing. I think that's definitely one of his many skills and talents, so I'm very happy I read it because it put me definitely in the mood to continue with Rick Riordan. I gave this a 3 stars. I don't think it's necessary, but I do think it's a fun time. And that's it. These are all of the books I read in the month of August. Please let me know if you've read any of them. Did you like them? Did you hate them? Do you feel the same about the Atlas 6 as I do? Please let me know. If you would like to follow me on any of my other social medias, I do leave a link down below to my Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram if you would like to follow me there. And also, because it is the end of the video, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. I tell you all the time, it means a lot to me. It does wonders for my channel, just makes me feel really special overall, so thank you. I never know how to end these things after I get all sappy, so I will see you next time, probably with a really interesting video if I end up filming it. Okay, bye.